It's my privilege to welcome our next candidate for the Extension Farm Manager position. ChrisTaylor is coming to us from University of Wisconsin, sort of University of Wisconsin. He's been working with USDA NASS for several years now and is temporarily in Washington, D.C. working on a project with them. Chris is originally from Tennessee, did his undergraduate degree at Tennessee State. Then been at Wisconsin working on his PhD program. So Chris, looking forward to hearing your comments this morning. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thanks Lee, and I appreciate the hospitality of everyone. And so today I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit about where I would like to take the extension program. And so I titled this collaboration between producers. So collaborating between producers, county agents, students, and researchers in producing a world-class farm management extension program. And so one thing I really wanted to emphasize there was the whole collaboration and being able to bring in all the important players, because I feel like that's a really important aspect of what this job would potentially be from my point of view. And so so I just wanted to give a little bit of background about myself. As Leah mentioned, I am from Tennessee, and so a big fan of this part of the country. I'm originally from Columbia, Tennessee, which is some of you may have heard. It's called the mule capital of the world. Have a Mule Day parade there every year. Kind of a big mule market. I know Kenny was telling me that he had actually been down there before, trading in mules, and I was with a mule trader. And as I understand it, equine is a small part of the ag industry here, so that's good. And so one thing that got me interested in agriculture was my grandparents, who had a kind of a smaller cow-calf operation there in Pulaski, Tennessee. And so being able to kind of help out with that and see everything they're involved on the farm got me real interested in it. And so decided to major in agribusiness at Tennessee State University. And so it was a real nice department there, kind of a smaller department, but a good one. And so while there, I also got the opportunity to intern with the the Tennessee field office there for USDA NASS. And so got the opportunity to work on several different farmer and agribusiness surveys there. And so after graduating from the agribusiness program there at Tennessee State, went on to work for the Wisconsin field office in Wisconsin, and got to work on a bunch of different surveys there, like prices received by farmers for grain, manufactured dairy products, census of agriculture, ARM survey. Got to do a lot of good, interesting work with that, and so that was nice. But really wanted to do graduate school in Ag Econ, and so that had kind of always been a goal of mine, and so started there in 2009, and so I've been working with some of you may know Brent Ewith. He's at the Center for Cooperatives there in Wisconsin, and also had the chance to work heavily with Brian Gould, who's a dairy economist, does a lot of extension work, and also with Mark Stephen there at the Center for Dairy Profitability. Been able to work on those types of problems. And so recently completed my, well, not recently, but about a year and a half ago completed my proposal for dissertation, which is pertaining to spatial competition and the farmer handler decision problem in the Wisconsin milk procurement market. And so in addition to focusing on that research, been able to, one thing I was really proud of was being able to have produced this extension product for farmers, which was basically being able to look across different pricing dimensions with regard to what drives dairy pricing, and produce that as a product for dairy farmers so that they can look at it for be able to use it as a negotiating chip, bargaining chip, to be able to kind of take it to their handler and say, you know, this is something that I feel like my price isn't good enough for this. Maybe we can work that up. And then the other is the increased transparency within the pricing in the market. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. But most recently, I started a job with NAS and Research and Development Division. So we've been working on several different projects. So one has been with dealing with price index estimators for farm products and farm inputs, and then another has been dealing with farm number estimators. And so with regard to the price index estimators, that's a really interesting topic. One way I like to explain it is, you know, you look at different farm commodities and being able to produce a price index for them. So one example would be if you look at a typical vegetable commodity. And so in vegetable commodities, you know, you have all different types of the commodity that have different price variation there. And so, you know, as an example, you would have the processing vegetable varieties, which have more of a lower price, and then you have the fresh market varieties, a little bit higher price, and then you have organic commodities, which have even higher price. And so being able to generate a price index for a commodity like that, where there's so much price variation, it's often is a little bit adds a challenge to doing that. And so that's one thing that we're looking at changing there, just to talk about that. And so just wanted to start off by talking a little bit about the importance, what I see as the importance of the Cooperative Extension Service. So I think it's a very important part in the welfare of farmers and the community in general. So with the help of Extension, productivity in the ag sector has more than doubled since Cooperative Extension has come into existence. So Cooperative Extension has played a very big role in that, and I think it will have a big role in moving forward. And so producers and members of the community in general rely on Extension as an unbiased and comprehensive source of information. And I think unbiased there is key, because there are oftentimes other organizations that compete with Extension in terms of generating output, the type of output that might be useful. And so being in this unbiased position, I think, is an important part of the Extension mission. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my Extension philosophy in particular. And so I believe that any Extension program should serve some practical, useful purpose in the farmer's business and the community livelihood. I believe that good Extension is research-based, but on the other hand, I believe that good research should be Extension-based. And so getting back to providing some practical, useful purpose, I think that's one thing that we should strive for, and not forgetting that the farmer's welfare is an incredibly important thing. I also, as I mentioned before, collaboration amongst the producers, county agents, students, and researchers is very important, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that here moving forward. And so I kind of see there being three basic types of Extension programs. And so one would be a service, and so some examples of that may be providing a benchmarking service, being able to help with on-farm budgeting, helping farmers to get access to a particular market, or just deciding which farm bill program to choose, for example, here. And that's been a big issue in grain and dairy industry here recently. Another type of extension service I would see is would be skill instruction, and so that could be doing something dealing with farm management software, so teaching regarding that, decision-making tools, showing farmers how to access certain data products that would be of interest to them. Then the other extension service I would see is information sharing, and so that would be more of like connecting contacts, providing producers access to certain data that would be available through extension as well. So wanted to talk a little bit about the extension programs I would like to develop if offered the position. And so a big one that I would really like to kind of start off with would be the benchmarking. Also making production decisions in volatile markets, human resource management issues, and I'm going to talk a little more about these in detail here. And contract management, also farm management software training, and exploring new market opportunities to increase on-farm income. And so with regard to benchmarking, just a little bit of talk about what that is. And so what this could be is taking producer price, production, or commodity quality information, and basically being able to compare that information across different producers so that they can see how they're performing relative to each other. And typically that's done to measuring it in terms of some degree of closeness. And so close could mean, how close the producer is to other producers, but it could be for other measures of closeness. For example, measuring producers within the same farm size or the same farm type. And so that's an important part of benchmarking. I think there are kind of two important roles of benchmarking. There could be one, producers able to use it as a bargaining chip to say, in comparing their price, what they're receiving with other producers, but also being able to use it to help increase market transparency, which would both of those would increase competitive behavior in the industry. And so I think also quality and production benchmarking would help from a management aspect. If a farmer is seeing that, for example, his protein content isn't as high as it should be, there could be some things done within the feed rations to be able to increase that to make it more on par with other producers. And so I just wanted to provide a kind of quick example from this survey that we did for my dissertation. And so here are some example of what would be some price benchmarking aspects. And so in looking at this, they're ranked by basically order of pricing importance. And so if you look here, this is just the amount. So this is for 1 month, March 2013. And so you can kind of get an idea of how big of an importance each of these different pricing factors come to play for producers. And so I'm just going to focus on the median here. So I think that's the best measure. And so you can see the average price was right around $17. And so the biggest component of that price was the protein content of the milk. And then you can see, and then there's butterfat, other solids, quality premium price, producer price differential, and so on. But one thing that I think is important here in being able to have this type of information, summary information available to the producer is that he or she can look at this and say, how am I doing relative to others? So, and ideally there would be also a range provided as well, so that the producer can get some idea, how am I doing in terms of the price I'm receiving for my protein content, or how am I doing in terms of, a big one in Wisconsin is the hauling deduction rates, and so looking at that and how they compare, because there's a lot of a lot of variation in terms of what prices producers are being charged for hauling rates. And so that would be a big one that producers would be able to look at and say, you know, how am I doing? But then there's also, here are some examples of quality measures so that producers can see how they're doing relative to others in terms of quality measures. And so protein test levels, for example. Also, for example, how far is the producer away from the processing plant? And so just to get a general idea of this, 1 degree is 60 miles about. And so a producer can see, you know, how far am I away from processing plant, because that drives the hauling price. And so that would play a big part there for the producer. Also, being able to provide information like how many years has the average producer been with his or her hauler or handler, and how many times have producers switched within the industry. So as an example here, you know, this is the number of switches between handlers within the last 10 years. How much switching has there been? Because that's kind of a measure of, you know, how competitive the industry is.
Right, Chris, what's N on this survey, the number of observations?
Oh, right. So 400, a little over 400. So, and it's pretty evenly spread there. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about making decisions in volatile markets. And so, in particular, wanted to focus kind of on making production decision with regard to field crops as an example. And so if you look at how, so this is basically just the price index for feed grains versus the price index for fertilizer. So, you know, as we all know, I mean, one of the big production decisions in terms of field crop production is determining what level of fertilizer use to use in the field crops. And so if you look at how these two, you know, if both of them varied together, then we probably would say, you know, there isn't really any big changes to make. But because they've kind of oftentimes they've varied so much in the last 10 years, and they haven't been going the same direction, like we see here most recently. You know, there's been they've been heading different ways. And so when it is the case that they are heading different ways, there should be some decision in the farmer's mind with regard to, is it really worth it to get to this level of nitrogen use if the fertilizer prices are at this level compared to, for example, corn prices. And so looking at that and kind of incorporating that type of volatility into a production decision, I think is something an interesting area of farm management research that could, and extension that could go in moving forward. And so another interesting example that I think could be a good extension program is dealing with human resource management issues. And so a big aspect of that is the farm labor pool. I think the general trend has been to see a decrease in it. And so one big aspect of that has been the urban to rural migration, as well as decrease in the number of farms that we've seen over time. So that has driven decreases in the farm labor pool. Also, the increasing specialized nature of operations and technical specialization has led to cases where oftentimes farm workers will need to get lots of training to be able to work on the farm. And so being able to recruit and retain has become an important issue that I think there could be an interesting extension program for that. And then also contractual relationships, being able to manage those and decide which factors are important for the producer in terms of developing a contract, as well as choosing which contract to use. And so that's been a big issue in the poultry, the hog, vegetable, fruit, and as I understand it, with the tobacco industry as well. And so being able to manage those contracts effectively, how to do that. And so, in particular, contractors are looking more at managing production decisions on the farm, and so how to deal with that as well. Another area of extension work would be interested in getting involved with would be farm management software. And so I think that there's been a growth in particular with regard to precision agriculture type software. And so being able to provide formal training to farmers to be able to use this type of software, I think is an interesting area of extension that could be developed. I think it would be great to have actually being able to get into a computer lab and actually try out some of this, and I think it could serve a useful purpose in terms of farmers being able to actually be able to try it out without being pressured to buy these types of software. So that could play an important role. Another example is marketing opportunities. So with regard to being able to what type of marketing for a farmer to choose. So a big example has been growth of the conventional grain markets. And so when I say conventional, I'm talking about not GMO, but also not organic. And so that's kind of been a growing area of grain marketing in the industry. And so as that becomes more of an issue, it could also lead to possibility of being able to, the U.S. being able to trade within the international grain market. And so there are more and more elevators, I think, that are starting to pay a premium for conventional grain. And so that's another example of a marketing issue. And on a related note, the RBGH-free milk is another example. And so, and then also thinking about the different factors that handlers use in deciding which price to offer to producers. And so now I wanted to talk about getting the different actors and players involved in an extension program. So I think a big part of this is the producers. You know, that these are the people who are ultimately trying to help. They're the ones who know what issues need to be solved in the industry, or what types of services could be offered. And so my goal, if offered the position, would be to work through county extension agents in developing this extension programming, and in particular focusing on extension program that would be useful for them. I think another big aspect of in this position will be being able to work with county extension agents, and I think a big part of that would be the trust issue, and with regard to establishing relationships with the county agents. And so if one thing I would focus on as an example would be to be able to go out for the first couple of months and just work on establishing the relationships with the county agents. And so I feel like they're kind of the gatekeepers of the extension relationship with producers. And so being able to go out and establish a relationship with them first and work through them in developing that extension program would be a very important thing to do. I'd also be very interested in working with students, both undergraduate and graduate students. I feel like they bring fresh ideas to the table. They're oftentimes very hard workers and have a variety of interests. And so I would be very interested in working with them, both through teaching as well as advising. And so I think that incorporating students is also a very important aspect of, because this is the university, and that should be a prime importance for the university. As well as the other factor, I think, a lot of, especially in ag college, that there are a lot of students who are actually coming from farm families. And so oftentimes, if those students are the ones going back to the farm, being able to develop that relationship, that's often the first step in developing their relationship, because students who come through the university and then go back to the farm, having established that relationship would be key for extension. And then also being able to get researchers involved, so they're on the forefront of knowledge in the field, and so they also they have the knowledge of what are the different techniques that would be used to solve a particular problem. And so then my goal also would be from the extension to be able to actually produce research that would be interesting both for producers and for the field in general. And so that would be another goal of mine if offered the position. So then also in terms of future areas of research, I think that spatial competition would be a particularly interesting question. I think there are some interesting issues to look at with regard to tobacco production, for example, in that area. Human resource management issues, as mentioned before. I think there's also a little bit to be done with regard to price indexes for farm products and inputs. And then making production decisions in volatile markets, as I mentioned before. And then also recently been getting into Bayesian statistics and being able to use that as a way of understanding not just the average causal effects, but also looking at the distribution of those. And so I think that will be another interesting area of research. And so just wanted to quickly summarize my main points from the presentation. So I think one of the biggest aspects is establishing trust and relationships. That cannot be overstated. I think especially in extension, being able to establish that especially with the county agents and then through the producers, being able to establish the trust and relationships. Also, I think that good extension is research-based, but also the other way around. Good research is extension-based. And then I think as a university, students are of a prime importance for us, and that should always be kept in mind. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to interview with everyone, and I hope you have a great Thanksgiving, being Thanksgiving week. So I know I will, but I hope y'all do too. Thank you. And any comments, questions, discussion?
Chris, you've spent a lot of time working with NAS. Most people don't spend time working with NAS, yet NAS ultimately is the source of a huge amount of the information that we either use directly or indirectly.
Right.
Can you sort of think of ways that your experience with NAS would help you with an extension program?
Well, I think in my experience with NAS, I think that's where I've really developed this whole idea of the key of how a key trust and developing relationships is, because in going out and surveying producers, that has to be established before in collecting data, so that would be one area of working with NAS that's really taught me. But then also being knowledgeable of all the kind of the industry from a top level perspective, like seeing the inner workings there of across a wide variety of the industry. I think that's given me a lot of exposure to that as well. That would be useful for this type of position. And so, and seeing really the on-farm data at the micro level, as well as looking at the summary level, it's been interesting there. And so, and being able to understand really some of the finer points of farm level data, and I think that would be serve this type of position very well.
Chris, maybe you could comment a little bit more and describe. I was intrigued by your thoughts of production decisions in volatile markets, and the specific example of fertilizer price volatility versus feed grain price volatility. What techniques would you use, what methods of analysis, and do you have a little bit more depth in your vision with regard to that you could share?
That's a good question. I think being able to, I think the traditional way of thinking about it has been, you know, what are the optimal levels of, you know, for example, nitrogen levels to reach a certain yield. I think that's been the typical thinking, but that type of you know, extension thinking doesn't take into account this volatility in fertilizer levels. And so being able to develop, for example, decision-making tools depending on what the current fertilizer price is, and deciding, you know, in addition to just determining optimal fertilizer levels for a given yield, but also looking at where the optimal fertilizer levels for a given price of fertilizer. And so incorporating decision tools would be an example of an extension output that would come into play there. So factoring in not just what are the optimal application rates, but also what is the I mean, based on not just the optimal yield, but also based on what the current market price is.
Follow up on that real quick. Some agronomists use a production function called linear plateau. Have you heard of that before?
I have.
Linear response,
Right.
peaks, and spikes.
Right.
So if you had a production function like that, and you were thinking about optimization, how would it be different if you were using that kind of production function versus the curved ones that we're typically used to working with?
Right. So I think the point here would be that in looking at those type of production function is that you don't want to just have the level of fertilizer application where you get to the top, but you also want to look at, so you may not end up being at the top because the price level is so high that maybe you're doing better off in terms of profit by sticking somewhere there before you get to the top. And so I think traditional thinking would say that you apply the minimum level of fertilizer so that you get there to the top of the plateau. But here with this type of thinking, if fertilizer price gets too high, then you may be better off sticking there somewhere in the slope of the production function.
You talked a little bit about contracting. What role do economists have in analyzing contracts?
And so I think part of that is figuring out what are going to be the best types of contracts to be able to really reach a particular level of production, as an example. And so being able to kind of decide what would be the optimal types of contracts for a given type of production, and in particular looking at it, I think, from which handler a producer would choose would be a particularly interesting aspect of that contracting problem. I think one kind of traditional kind of economist way of thinking about it is thinking about it in terms of like moral hazard, and so what type of contracts can a contractor offer that would be able to get to a certain level of quality, and how those contracts are designed to be able to do that. And so that's one kind of aspect of that.
Can you give a couple of examples of what you had in mind with regards to an extension program looking at human resource management? The reason that I ask is I think that one of the areas in which I think this position has the potential to really impact horse farms is through human resource management.
And so I think that there are different types of incentives that could be offered, as an example, to be able to recruit the labor, as well as being able, so you know, as an example, you know, being able to offer bonuses or different pay structures to on farms, you know, employees, depending on how long they've been there or how they're performing, would be one aspect of it. But I think also being able to create kind of a clearing market for labor, farm labor in a particular area, could be also a potentially interesting extension product there as well, to be able to really increase ability for producers or you know, equine operators to be able to find that farm labor.
Okay, this is from Greg Hallich.
Oh, okay.
What do you see as the biggest opportunity to help cow-calf farmers retain record profits? How are these record cattle prices affecting stocker operators?
Okay. So I think one key there would be looking at how what type of markets are being used to connect the cow-calf operators with going what type of market they're being able to use to sell the beef cattle, looking at that and how that would vary amongst how different markets that they're going to would be one aspect of that problem. I think looking at different feed types and how that would vary, and going back to the volatile price example, you know, looking at how the different, not just how meat production varies depending on what type of feed is being used, but also looking at incorporating prices of the feed into that production decision, I think it would be an interesting way of looking at how to better increase profitability in the cow-calf industry.
One last thing. You know, Kentucky, like a lot of states, has a farm business analysis program. So we've got good data on people who are in the farm business analysis program. And you can do some really nice benchmarking on those guys, but they tend not to be representative of a whole lot of farms in the state. They tend to be bigger and tend to be in the western part of the state. So if you want to do this benchmarking thing, the place where the hole is, I think, are the small to medium-sized producers, because we don't have a systematic set of data. We're not a state that ARMS gives you state-level data, so you can't really appeal to ARMS within the state to give you benchmarks. How would you, since benchmarking was the first thing on your list, I'm assuming that was in order of what you would like to do, rather than reverse order of what you would like to do. But how could you get to benchmarking for small and medium-sized farms using secondary data? Because you're probably not going to get to it through primary data.
Well, in using secondary data, I mean, if the data is not available, I mean, it's definitely a challenge. You know, I mean, my first response to that would be, you know, go out and being able to do a survey and, you know, really couching that as a way of to help the smaller and medium-sized producers. Without having the data, it does make it very challenging. I think, you know, I mean, there are certain models that you can use to deal with that in terms of, like, if you're doing like a model estimation, but whenever you're doing something just like benchmarking, I mean, that's really challenging to be able to do that type of work. And so I think the important aspect of that would be to just, you know, use what data you have, and being able to see. I mean, if you can determine how the relationships amongst the different producers works out, then you may be able to use some of the bigger farm data to estimate what the smaller farms would be looking at. But that is a challenging topic.
Chris, many years ago when I came here to interview, I was warned about having a faculty member that he would ask a question, it'd be so long that my challenge would be to remember where he started. So maybe the nature of this question, so bear with me. You talked about relationship and trust, and that's important. I would certainly agree with that. Dr. Freshwater asked a really good question about NAS and your experience with NAS data. Now, I want to put this question because it's the kind of question you would encounter on an extension trail, and I'd much rather you encounter it first here rather than on the extension trail.
Right.
But you've given me all these numbers here, and how do I know that damn one of them's right?
Well, that's, I mean, you hear that at NAS as well. Yeah, they're not right, yeah. I mean, being able to, I mean, I think a lot of times an important part of producing this type of, you know, data product is being able to compare that with some measure of reason, and being able to use. I think that's another reason why it's so important to incorporate you know, different specialists who have the knowledge within the industry, to be able to get feedback from them and say, you know, this isn't making sense. You know, ask them to make sure, is this making sense? Does this fit within some level of reason with regard to what price we're seeing here? And, you know, maybe if someone looked at that hauling price, they would say, you know, well, I don't see very many producers who are getting, you know, 15 cents a hundredweight for hauling, and so, well, one reason why it may look like that, even though that's the case for that producer, maybe in that region of the state maybe in one region they're getting a lot lower hauling rates, but in another region they're getting a lot larger hauling rates. So in that example, if we were to go to talk to a specialist about that, you know, he or she may say, you know, well, maybe we should break this up with regard to the different regions so that it looks more reasonable for looking at farmers in different regions and how that will compare. So,
Thanks, somebody will ask those kind of questions.
oh yeah, understood.
Any other questions?
Greg's typing one right now.
Okay.
He hasn't finished typing it yet.
It's longer now.
As long as it's Steve Isaac's question.
Oh, never mind. It was a comment about the connection.
Not your fault, Chris.
Okay.
You dropped, it was a dropout for a second.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Chris.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it. I hope you get a chance to follow up on some of those questions later today as we meet with faculty. So, well, thank you.